Good evening, Barbadians. I'm so happy to be here standing at this podium talking to you again. I know that I'm still under doctor's orders and not fully back to work, but I felt the need to talk to you at the end of this week, especially after the week that we've had, both locally and globally. The world as we know it stands just shy of 2 million people infected with this dreaded COVID-19 virus. Indeed, more than 100,000 people have died globally. In our own country, the numbers that have been given to me show that 68 persons have been infected in Barbados with the virus, and regrettably, 4 persons are no longer with us. These are difficult numbers to comprehend, but at the same time, we are buoyed by the fact that 11 persons have returned to their homes, having recovered completely from the virus, and that we continue to work with the other 53 persons who in fact are still affected and most of whom are doing quite well. I speak against this background because this more than anything else brings home the reality of what it is we're facing. And for me at a personal level, this has been a difficult day because one of those Barbadians who died overseas, and we now know that there are at least 20 Barbadians that have died in the United States of America, predominantly New York, but it also in other states. We don't have the numbers from Canada or indeed from the United Kingdom as yet. But for me, this has been a difficult day because at a very personal level, one of those Barbadians who passed away from COVID-19 in Florida was in fact buried earlier today. And therefore, for me, it has been a moment of serious reflection because just a few weeks ago, he was with us, circulating, moving, and being with family and friends. But such is the nature of this virus that it literally can cause persons, literally, to have their lives change either completely or worse still, to lose their lives. What is at stake? Lives and livelihoods. And that is the balance that we as a nation have now to manage. But as I even begin to talk to you, I say so, that I'm buoyed that as the Minister of Health, Jeffrey Bostic, so eloquently put it last Sunday morning, this nation shall not retreat and shall not surrender. And I want against that background to speak to you because it is not for me to be distracted at this stage or diverted to other topics that may have a partisan flavor. We have no such time for that as we fight this battle. This battle requires not just a whole of government approach, but a whole of nation and a whole of region approach on the part of us within this Caribbean region. The world is fighting for every single resource that it can, and countries large and small are in the race together. It is why from day one, I've sought to have an inclusive approach that brings together the entire nation, from private sector to public sector, from labor movement to political entities and church, non-governmental organizations, all levels of society, all categories of persons, because that is the only way we are going to get through this, both in terms of securing life and livelihood. I want on this evening to remind us, therefore, that it is always easy to be distracted. But I learned at a very long time ago that when you are in the midst of a crisis, stay focused. Stay focused. And do not allow those things other than that which literally threatens to implode the mission. Do not be distracted by those other things on the outside. There have been considerable improvements in the social distancing, the physical distancing, and in the actions and habits of Barbadians. And I want, first and foremost, to thank Barbadians, because we as a people will always reflect what is wrong. Regrettably, that is just part of who we are, because we're comforted by the fact that we need to perfect the task. But at this point in time, I want first and foremost to thank Barbadians, to thank the many, many tens of thousands who have literally gotten the message and have been working with us. Indeed, I can safely say that as compared to 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, there are far more Barbadians who understand the nature of the problem that we are confronting and who have therefore fallen into line to cooperate, be it with physical distancing, be it with not congregating in places where they do not need to be it with respect to the washing of their hands or the hand sanitizer, be it with respect to the wearing of masks, be it with respect to not putting their hands on their faces. And I'll come back to the issue of masks later. But suffice it to say that we are happy that the majority have come to this point. There are still some, nevertheless, who are not yet yielding and who are not yet listening and who are not yet acting in a manner that will protect all of us. And I want simply to say to them tonight that the person who your behavior will affect is a person that you might love the most. The person who your behavior might affect is the person who you might need the most. And we need to step back and reflect and to understand that in this life, we are expected to deal with all types of circumstances. It so happens that it is our lot at this stage to deal with a pandemic that is threatening the very essence of how we grew up knowing how to relate to each other. But we are human beings with a heart and with a brain. And we can therefore assimilate and we can talk and we can understand in the same way that when a child puts his hand near fire, as I've said to you before, they know not to do it again. And this week, the reality of Barbadians passing away both here and overseas has been so sobering that I'm satisfied that it has had an impact on persons. And even after the difficult day that we saw 10 days ago in the supermarkets, 9 days ago, we have seen a change in behavior the last 2-3 days. We see from customers to workers, from owners of supermarkets to policemen. We see all manner and breed of people going now and recognizing, my man, just give me a little more space here. My lady, I don't want to be rude, but I think that we would all be doing it for our own sake if there's a good few feet between us. And we can do it politely, and people have been doing it politely. Today, there are some who were worried about Cheapside Market, and so was I, but equally, Rome was not built in a day, and I'm satisfied the Tsar himself, Mr. Richard Carter, told me he went down there this morning, and that for the most part, that people were observing the rules. He did indicate to me that if you were driving past in a car, it perhaps looked a little worse than it did in real life. But we're not quite there yet. We're doing well, but let us redouble our efforts to go forward. And it is against that background, therefore, that I will need to talk to you about what the public health advisors are advising. It is their judgment that we are not yet at a stage where we can return to the normal hours that would have guided our business and our activity and the normal activities that we would have been fully engaged in before the presence of COVID-19 on our shores just under a month ago. Against this background, the Cabinet of Barbados has met. We've also consulted broadly and widely, and it is our judgment that we are going to need to be able to hold strain a little longer, and that the activities which would have come to an end on April 14th with the restricted movement of people should now be extended until midnight the night of May 3rd. What does that mean? That on May 4th, that will be the first day we go back to a non-restricted, non-24-hour curfew. But if we are going to do this, we need to make some adjustments. And we must learn from the last few weeks. And those who are frightened to learn, let me tell you, I am not. I will make sure that this government continues to respond to this crisis in the fluid manner in which it requires us to do so if we are to be successful. It means, therefore, that we are prepared to look at easing some of the restrictions, given the fact that at the end of the period, Barbadians will have been in their houses for just under 5 weeks. Against that background, I also want to announce that it is very clear that school cannot reopen on Tuesday next week as was originally intended. I've asked the Substantive Minister of Education, Santia Bradshaw, to meet with the principals and the teachers because it is also clear to us that we are going to have a long-term plan with respect to e-learning, distance learning, and equally, we have to have the conversations with CXC because, as you are aware, there are at least 2-year groups who are expected to have CXC exams, and these exams depend on a regional timetable and not just a domestic timetable. The common entrance, we have more flexibility, but for those parents who are anxious, I would say that those consultations with the principals, the teachers, and the unions will allow us to see at what deferred date this exam may be possible. It is not for us to settle those things without consultation. Similarly, we are introducing a new arrangement, and I want to take 2 minutes to explain it to you, because this new arrangement means that we will have a desire that persons can leave their house on average 2 days a week to do the essential things in life. And let's get real. People need food. We've accepted that. And while the initial shutdown was restrictive, we expanded it this week to include elements of electronic commerce, which probably will be the way of the future, but which the capacity of the supermarkets are not yet ready to absorb, and a number of them would have had to have asked persons to stop the ordering to give themselves a chance to meet the backlog in orders. But I want to say 2 things even before I get to the arrangements. There is no shortage of food in Barbados. There is no shortage. And I don't need people to be rushing. In fact, I'm asking people, take it light, take it easy. We've already established that this is not a time for what you want, it's more a time for what we need, first thing. Secondly, there is no shortage. And therefore, if we just go about our business in a manner that can defend the physical distance and defend the other things that we need to do to protect each and every one of us, then we can get through this thing alive. I'm saying to you that the bottom line is that we have chosen to look at how many Barbadians there are in the alphabet with their names beginning with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, coming right down to Z. And in recognizing that we all know a lot of Barbadians' names begin with B, Braffett, Bannister, all kinds of names, and an A, Aline. It turns out that A and B constitute about 1/5 of the population alone. If we miss and put in C there, then the numbers topple over. So on first glance, it may appear to be to some persons to be complex. But the only thing you need to know is what is your letter. My letter is M. So I know that on Fridays, I will be allowed to shop in the supermarket from 8 to 11, and on Tuesday afternoons. I will be allowed to go to the bank on Fridays. Now, I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit because I've given you that example to show you that this is not an arbitrary decision. This is a decision that's been reflected, that rests upon the basis of our being able to see how many Barbadian households there are, how many Barbadians there are, what is the most equitable distribution we can have, and how do we give every Barbadian the chance not to go on the street once a week, but twice a week. Why? Because with the best will in life, people forget things. Oh Lord, I gone on the street. I forget my ID card. I forget this or I forget that. So we say 2 bites at the cherry, 2 half days. Let's try and limit vehicular traffic and the number of human beings moving on the road at the same time. So everybody will go. The memes have been created. As soon as this broadcast is finished, I expect them to be circulated. So you will know what your days are. Mine, Tuesday and Friday is M. If you are A and B, Monday is you in one day, and you have another day for you as well. So I don't want to get into all of the details, but this will be immediately circulated through all forms of media as soon as I finish. What does it mean? We're still going to encourage curbside pickup. We're still going to encourage delivery, but we are also going to open up the supermarkets for limited hours from 8 to 11 and from 1 to 4. We will also have 2 dedicated days for seniors, persons over 70, Tuesday morning and Sunday morning. And that will allow them to go in when nobody else is in the supermarket, because when all is said and done, we know that our seniors and those who are vulnerable are the ones that we need to protect as far as possible. We have, through the welfare, arranged a number that people can still call in if they need help beyond what we have provided there. We've also agreed that in addition to the supermarkets being from 8 to 11, that people understand that 11 means the time within which you walk in. 4 means the time within which you walk in. But if when you get in there and you are still picking up, we are saying that you should be allowed to finish shopping and go to the cashier. So it means then that we have to give ourselves a 2-hour buffer in the middle of the day. And hence the next set of letters doesn't start at 11:30 or 12, it starts at 1. Because we reckon that it may take another hour, 90 minutes to clear the supermarket again. And then we start again at 1 o'clock and go to 4. And whoever in at 4, they may not get out till 5. And then we have to allow the supermarkets to restock for the next day. And we're asking the unions and the private sector to work with us. These are not normal times. These are not times that anybody, any part of this world predicted. But we do believe that we have to balance people's access to food, people's access to money, people's access to medicines, people's access even, and we're going to open now from the Wednesday next week, when the new order starts, not just these supermarkets from Wednesday next week, for 8 to 11 and 1 to 4, but also hardware stores half day. The post office will remain open Monday to Friday, 8 to 3:15. And I want to say it, the majority of post offices had no problems. Eagle Hall, I born in Eagle Hall. Eagle Hall always full of people. Is a gathering point without people having to go into the center of town. But the truth is that we have, equally when we see it, we are our brother's keeper. We are our sister's keeper. And therefore, if you see a lot of people turn up at once, that's why I insisted, even from my sick bed, that there has to be tents and there has to be somewhere where people can literally be accommodated. But the bottom line is that while we are trying to move everybody as far as possible to electronic and digital transactions, the reality is we still have a lot of people who depend on checks, who depend on cash. And we have to go where they are rather than wishing they were somewhere else and that they could do these things. So against that background, the post offices will open every day, Monday to Friday, from 8 to 3:15, just as essential a service as the police or the hospitals or the supermarkets. Apart from setting aside these days for supermarkets, hardware stores, and commercial banks, we've also determined that fruit and vegetable vendors, in the same way as butchers and fish markets, are an essential part of who we are as a people. And we believe that given the fact that we're extending for another 2.5 weeks, that it is critical that therefore these persons be allowed also to ply their trade and to earn their livelihood, but also to provide the fruit and vegetables that our population needs. In fact, it is that is going to boost our immune system more than anything else. A lot of conquerors and a lot of pie really can't help you at this stage. So eat some fruit and eat some vegetables. And to that extent, I'm asking the vendors, and I've asked the Minister of Agriculture to reach out to the President of Barvin. It may mean that we may have to spread out people a little more so that there is not the bunching that took place in Cheapside. There's no reason why we can't use the open space, for example, by the Lower Green. There's no reason why we can't use the open space by part of the bus stand, because the bus stand is not being fully utilized in the same way at this point in time. And when these new arrangements kick in to play on Wednesday, April the 15th, I expect that by then the Minister of Agriculture and his Markets Division will have worked out with those vendors how best to be able. We're not talking about vending of oils. We ain't talking about vending of DVDs. We ain't talking about vending of clothes. We ain't talking about vending of toys. We're talking about fruit and vegetables. I want, when all of this is done, for us to meet again and to have a good time. And therefore, you've got to take care of yourself and take care of your body. So, my friends, the principle, 2 days a week, alphabetically get to know your days. Mine, Tuesday and Friday. Similarly, there will be special days for senior citizens and differently able persons who themselves are naturally vulnerable. And just as we were doing before when the supermarkets had a special hour or two for them in the morning, we've created 2 special days for them with the supermarkets, with the bankers, and we will recommend a special time with the hardware stores as well. I know this is hard. And for somebody like me, it's doubly hard, because I don't think I've ever stayed in any place for a week without moving. I don't think I've ever, prior to the operation 2 weeks ago, I never even had a stitch. So I don't even know what it is to be told, rest yourself. But when I know the pain and when I know the consequences of not doing it, the risk of infection, the risk of adhesions, the risk of all other kinds of things, I humble myself and I listen to those who are there to direct me. And in the same way that I am humbling myself and submitting myself to the directives of my medical team, I'm asking Barbadians to let us as a nation humble ourselves and recognize that we have to go 1 step back in order to go 3 steps forward going forward. We already, as you know, would have announced in Parliament 3 weeks ago, I would have announced a survival package, and I've asked the Ministry of Finance to please reduce that into a graphic form for everybody. But even with the announcement of that basic survival package, I told you then that information is literally unfolding by the minute. Part of the difficulty that we've had with the NIS applications, and there have been just under 14,000 unemployment benefit applications since the middle of March. Part of the difficulty that we have is that employers have not all submitted the earning schedule of the workers. I'm using this forum to appeal to employers to please submit that earning schedule, even if nothing else. Please submit it, because it allows us to be able to process quicker. Without prejudice to that, however, I've asked the chairman of the NIS and the board of the NIS and the director of finance and economic affairs to put in place a separate system, and they have agreed and have told me that they have devised it. I met with them as early as this morning, or as late as this morning, I should say. And that separate system will see a separate group of people managing just unemployment benefits alone, because we recognize that people need to have access to that money, and that in many instances people have been placed on vacation, but that the vacation will come to an end during the next period. Against that background, we've agreed that that special system and special group of additional workers will be put in place, such that the first unemployment benefit check should go out within the next 10 days, and that equally, that first check should cover not 1 week, but 4 weeks of unemployment benefit one time, to give people the opportunity to steady themselves and to plan as they go forward. This is the absolute minimum that is required of us as a government and as a social security system in order to be able to protect those who are most in need. And we recognize that even where the earning schedules are not immediately available, we will have to go back and look at the average earnings of that person in order to make this judgment for the first month. Might I remind you that thanks to the introduction of unemployment benefits in the early 1980s, and we take these things for granted. A lot of countries don't have it. The US doesn't have an unemployment benefit scheme in the same way until recently that they're now trying to dole out and to give out monies to people. Barbados has had this now for near 40 years. Now, it is true that the unemployment benefit fund will be quickly exhausted, and the government is going to have to find the money to recapitalize those aspects of the Social Security scheme that are going to be most at pressure as a result of this extraordinary increase in unemployment. You look at the United States of America, people are already talking about unemployment going north of 30%, similar to the numbers in the Great Depression. And we don't know where it will end for them. We know, however, that this nation that we are in, we are accustomed to pulling together in times of great need. And that survival package that we first announced will be built upon now looking at the business side of it, because it's not only about survival, but it has to be about propulsion. And let me share with you what I told Cabinet. I went in just briefly into the meeting on Thursday. And by the way, we too are facing the adjustment, because I've said to them, it makes no sense having a long cabinet meeting on Thursday by telecoms, which is difficult. We will now meet twice a week for shorter periods of time in order to be able to execute the government's business with dispatch. I can also assure you that at least 3-4 times a week, the acting Prime Minister and the other subcommittee of ministers, who've been all doing an excellent job, have literally also been meeting with the private sector and the union movement at least 2-3 times a week, so that we are truly addressing this as one. But I'm saying to you that if we are going to go forward, I told Cabinet that there are 3 things that I require of them. One, that we need to be able to settle for those ministries. If you're delivering goods and services to the public, then work out how you have to operate in a COVID-19 environment. And the post office was just but one example of that reinforces why that is critical. 2, that I want from each cabinet minister, the 3 or 4 things that are novel, that are new, that are innovative, that will allow us to be fitter at the end of this than we were at the beginning. In other words, let us not waste this time. This is a time for us to retrain. This is a time for us to retool. This is a time for us to refurbish if we have access to the money. This is a time for us to renew. And there's no better time, as I've said to you, than the background of Easter to be in to deal with this message of renewal and repurposing. Against that background, we accept that there are going to be some long-term legacies. And the long-term legacy of the digital economy, more and more people are going to choose to do curbside pickup continuously for their groceries. More and more people are going to work and to deal with electronic transactions or digital transactions for the payment of bills. So that with every cloud there's a silver lining. But we have to be clear what we want it to be. And against that background, every minister has been told what are the 3 or 4 things, including making the doing of business easier, which we have been long working on in this country. And then, of course, we have the conversation that we need to have with respect to those things that we're going to have to put on the back burner, because it cannot be business as usual. So there may be 3 or 4 things that have to go on the back burner until we get out of the COVID-19 crisis. In any event, as I told you before, it is likely that 60% of this country in the medium term will be working to carry 100% of the country because of the vulnerabilities of elderly people and people who have comorbidities, which we all know about, regrettably, only too well. Having said that, the government has also agreed that, therefore, in addition to the survival package, we have to have a laser-like focus on where the jobs and the investment will come from as we move back out of this. This is not next month I'm talking about, but this is as soon as we are given the opportunity, because we're not going back to normal before. We have to create a new normal. And the new normal will require new economic paradigms. We have a national industrial policy that is coming to us very shortly, a draft policy for us to review. We have aspects of our e-commerce and e-governance with which Minister McConney's ministry is well advanced, and the country will learn a lot more about that, including the national ID card, which, if persons had it, would allow us to be able to do a lot more digitally than we're doing now. So I look forward to sharing that with you as we go forward. I give you the assurance that I will be addressing the country on a broader economic package, therefore that is about transformation and not just survival in the near future. But suffice it to say that I have also agreed with Cabinet to establish a Jobs and Investment Council that will help us with how do we mobilize and catalyze all of the investments and to create all of the jobs that we possibly can, first in a COVID-19 environment, and two, in a post-COVID-19 environment. And against that background, I'm happy to report that this will be a broad-based council, reflective of the social partnership as we have done from the very first day of office since we were elected, but equally also including former ministers of finance, because this island is simply too small and we need all hands on deck. Regrettably, former Prime Minister Sandiford is not in a position to serve with us, but I've gotten the agreement of former Prime Minister Owen Arthur as Minister of Finance and Mr. Christopher Sinclair as Minister of Finance, because this country will use all resources to ensure that there will be no surrender, no retreat, but also that there will be transformation. I told you in Parliament, one of the most difficult things for me to bear is that having got the country to the point where we have gotten it, we now have to go back to the starting line or even behind the starting line to run the race again. The good news is that this time when we are running, we are a lot stronger to run. And as I speak to you, our reserves, even this week, in the midst of the difficulties, are at $1.56 billion. And we expect to take in, as I told you in Parliament, another 360 million Barbados dollars from both the IMF and the IDB within the next 4 to 6 weeks, which will at least mean that we are fighting this battle with near $2 billion in reserves. So we have the ability to draw down on those reserves to protect our people. Enough of the economics on a Saturday night called Easter Saturday. I'll speak to you about that in the near future, within the next 10, 12 days. But let me also speak to the issues very quickly of our readiness. You've heard me over and over commend and thank the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance, Prime Minister's Office, and all of the people in the public and private sector, the 5 or 6 contractors who were working up at Harrison's Point, the ability to get Blackman Gollop converted to a 3rd campus for the Ministry of Health. Last Monday, I want to publicly commend and to thank the Cuban nurses who have joined us and who are making sure that we can have the capacity to meet any increased demand on our health services that may come. That's why we've rebuilt Harrison's Point, and I hope that there's a little short video that was done for me who couldn't go up to see the facility, and I hope that they'll share it with you to see how proud, because 5 weeks ago when I went up there, that was 15 and 20-foot bush. And every piece of window, door, conduit, wire, everything gone. And what you see today is a first-class modern facility with a primary care ICU that has negative pressure, therefore by protecting both patients and health workers at the maximum level that we can do so. We have had disruptions to our supply chain, as I told you before I went in for the procedure. That's been the most difficult thing, and that's a global problem now. I have been in contact with ministers and heads of government, not just from this region, but from other parts of the world in order to create partnerships, because if we can't get goods through one way, we have to try through another way. Having said that, we are making entreaties to all concerned, both at the multilateral level and at the bilateral level, because the bottom line is we need to be able to move goods here in order to support our people. It is against that background that we will have literally outreach, that we are going to have to maximize what we have here. Barbados has, I'm told, over 600 doctors. We need, therefore, more doctors and more of their resources on board. I heard Jeffrey make the call last Sunday morning. I know that there's a health advocates team being ably led by Dr. David Bayer, and I'd like for that health advocates team and for the Barbados Association of Medical Practitioners to work with the Ministry of Health. And believe you me, if you want to know what guides us, it is the determination of what is necessary to ensure that we can keep ahead of the game in terms of our health system's capacity to respond to Bajans' needs. So why are we keeping it low and quiet for the next 2.5 weeks? Because we need to give the nurses, the orderlies, the lab technicians, the doctors, the ability to manage those of us who may end up getting sick. And we see with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and I wish on behalf of the people of Barbados all of God's blessings to a speedy recovery for him. You see that it can happen untouched to anybody. We have a 7-year-old who caught it this week in this country. We had a 95-year-old who passed away from it. This thing is real, it is serious, but we can do it. And we can literally live and get accustomed to new ways of living and new ways of communicating and new ways of reaching out until such time as there is a vaccine. And even when there's a vaccine, let us understand and believe that we can literally take some of the things that we did in this time that bear replication and sustainability going forward. So, my friends, I want to salute publicly the doctors, the nurses, the orderlies, the lab technicians, the Dos Santos lab, which is proven to be one of excellent resource for us, such that other people who are having to rely and to send out tests to Carrefour, we're able to do it here. I want to thank the Cayman Islands government, who we've been working quietly behind the scenes in the region. Even though we have 50,000 kits coming through PAHO, as I indicated to you the last time, we bought another 20,000 kits, which are the ones used in South Korea, but compatible with the machines that we have here, because we need to be able to stock up on these kits and stock up on the swabs. In fact, the biggest problem we have now is access to swabs, and therefore we've been managing that process. The leadership of PAHO, the leadership of CARFA has been absolutely brilliant in their interaction with us. I have been in contact with the Director General of the WHO twice in the last week, even as he faces, in my view, baseless attacks that regrettably seem more to be focused on race rather than on competence. So that, believe you me, we have reached out as far as we can to protect what we need here. Against that background, as Chairman of CARICOM, I'll advise the country that there will be a special heads of government meeting. I've written to my colleague heads and asked that we meet on Wednesday, April 15th, so that we can share ideas, share experiences first and foremost, but also look and see whether this is not the moment where CARICOM's true promise is upon us. That the notion of a single domestic space, that the notion of a single market, and what therefore are those things that we need to do in order truly to allow our sovereign boundaries to have a virtual reality that is the CARICOM entity, the Caribbean community, while the legal sovereign boundaries remain what we know. And what do I mean by that? That we probably will have to have a common public health protocol and common border policy. But what it does is that it expands the market of persons who then can help sustain each other far wider than it was at the beginning of this address, just as other heads have had to do. I'm speaking to you not just about saving lives, but also sustaining livelihoods. Because one way or the other is going to rock you, and some people will be knocked completely over. And I never thought that I would have to live in a world where the world effectively stopped it stopped. And by stopping, those who are itinerant vendors, those who are daily or weekly wage earners, are the ones that we have now. I'm begging Barbadians to reach out and protect. I want to thank the many donors who have come forward to help us both with the medical equipment. We truly are blessed people. And I think it is fair to say, I don't have the exact numbers at my fingertips, but on last count on Thursday, we had in excess of 13 million Barbados dollars in donations to help the government with respect primarily with equipment, but equally also with the Adopt a Families program, which is so vital to just keeping us going. Our problem now is managing how we get things to people. And that's why I asked, look, I know it's difficult. I know that there's supermarket workers and bank workers and post office workers and others who are hearing me tonight and saying, Lord, but trust me, this is the only way we're going to be able to do it. And we're not putting everybody back to full normality, but we are doing it in a way that allows people to be able to walk and chew, walk and eat. Because at the end of the day, if we're not eating, we don't have the energy to walk. It's as simple as that. And to put it another way, in the same way that ventilators are so critical to human beings for oxygen, when the oxygen is being starved, banks are critical to economies for the oxygen of money to allow people to be able to live and to meet their other needs, because we do not all have the capacity to feed ourselves or to provide the basic essentials from medicine right back through to ourselves. So, like everything else in life, is balance. Too far east is as bad as too far west. And what do Bajans know how to do best, better than most people in the world? We know how to balance. We know how to keep it level. That's why sometimes people say, boy, Bajans, Baj, what are you doing? You ain't greeting me like you want to see me. Bajans are there for the long haul. We ain't got to shout loud from the mountaintops on the first meeting. We are there for the long haul. That's how we're built. That's who we are. So to that extent, this is the resource that is also critical for us now. At the regional level, as I said, if we can get that working so that we literally are our brother's keeper, then, and our sister's keeper, then I believe that it will make us stronger. As we go forward, the truth is I believe that regional blocks are going to become more important, because human beings are going to be frightened for full globalization onslaught in the early years of the recovery from this pandemic. But they're going to have to rely outside of their boundaries on their neighbors. And there's no better time than now to start this process. So my friends, what's the other bottom line? You know, they say my mother called me Mia Amor, and Kamau Braffett, who just died, said everything is in a name. So don't be surprised when I talk to you over and over. I keep telling people I am a New Testament girl. That's the truth. And I believe that the greatest of these things is love. We need love in this country now. Love for our family members, love for our neighbors, love for the people with whom we work. There is nobody in this country or in this region who could have predicted what we are in now, or who even caused it. But we all have to deal with it. And I know we are stronger dealing with it like this, interlocked, supporting each other, than like this with everything going in all different directions. I say that because we should pick sense from what happened this week. At least 3 of the people who presented were elderly people who probably came later than the doctors would have liked them to have come. I say that to make the point that I want us to be more proactive. I've asked the Welfare Department and the Czar, Mr. Richard Carter, to look and see how best we can reach out to all those over 70 in every community. I know that they did a wonderful job by the distribution of care packages a week ago to help get people through this. The government is also prepared to do what else it has to do with respect to that. I know that we're now about to get the vulnerable household cards out to people in the next week, 10 days. And similarly, that there has already taken effect an increase of 40% on every welfare payment from the 1st of April. 40%. So if you were getting $400 before, you will now get $560. Now this is the thing that we are committed to do. But I need you, whether in Bush Hall, whether in Crab Hill, whether in Gemswick, whether in Lamins, Bashaba, Sherburne, all around, for us to look and see who are the elderly people in here and who living alone. And let's check on them. The government has agreed that we will expand the number of public health personnel in order to be able to give them at least 60 more people who can work with the environmental health assistants, but these will now be environmental health liaison officers, so that in the community itself we can have a proactive approach. I'm not a doctor, but I'm satisfied that the earlier you catch something, hopefully the easier it is for you to manage it, even if not prevent it, but manage it. And to that extent, let us take the time to see if the people who live in 5 houses down one side, 5 houses down the other side, and 10 houses opposite, to make sure that if there's anybody in that catchment area that needs our assistance, or that we need to reach out to the COVID hotline, or indeed to the welfare department or the others, the Ministry of People Empowerment, in order to assist them. Later this week, Mr. Carter and Minister Ford will probably be addressing the country again in the same way that I expect within 2 weeks Santia will with respect to the educational arrangements. And similar to them, the Household Mitigation Unit headed by Corey Lane as well will be part and parcel of that work with them. I want us to ignore the naysayers. Believe you me, ignore them. Barbados can beat this. We, all of us, can beat this. I want you to stay locked on to the official sources, because, you know, nobody never heard of the phrase fake news before a few years ago, but regrettably everybody knows about fake news now. Because you barely turn on a smartphone and you have to ask yourself, this is true or this is false. But stay locked on to the official sources. My government has made it a commitment to keep you as advised as possible. And whether it is me, or whether it is Santia, or whether it is Jeffrey, or whether it is Dale, or whether it is Jerome, who's been quietly helping us reach out to the friends that we have in the world, or whether it is Kay McConney, who is making sure that the digital world that we're being lurched into is managed without threats to cybersecurity, or whether it is Minister Mo dealing with the communications message, or whether it is Minister Sutherland, whose ministry is still going around to make sure that there's not the level of price gouging that some people will try to do at this stage. You can't profit from people suffering, regardless of who it is, or whether it is the Minister of Agriculture, who has been working to be able to make sure that we can get that 750 acres on the public sector side back into production, but also working with the private farmers, because we are going to love to eat what we grow. And who don't like pickled breadfruit or roast breadfruit or sweet potato baked in the skin or out of the skin, or yam pie or green banana cuckoo? I want to invite you to celebrate and taste the wonder of the culinary experience that is Barbados. Does that mean you're not going to get pasta from outside? Of course you're going to get it. But the bottom line is, now is the time for us to build up our bodies and to build up our immunities. And in order to do that, we need to be eating ground provisions, we need to be eating vegetables, and we need to be eating fruit. Do like me, I cut out meat most days a week. Some days I don't really like fish, but I eat a little bit now. And some days I just cut out all of that and eat beans with the other things, because you'll be surprised what can sustain you. And I've gone back to something that my grandmother used to do. We never had dinner when I was a child. We used to have supper. And supper was what? A slice of toast or two. Sometimes cheese, sometimes not. Sometimes peanut butter, sometimes sardines, sometimes whatever. I have one heavy meal and a reasonably good breakfast. So that what I want Bajans to do is to recognize, don't run a sprint. Let's pretend it's a marathon. And if it's a marathon, let us pace ourselves. Let us forget about the naysayers. I have to thank God for being able to stand here today to you, in spite of the challenges that I had. I have to thank the acting Prime Minister and the members of my cabinet and the senior members of the public service. Today I had as many meetings with public servants as if it was a broad working day. I have to thank the members of the private sector and the union movement. I can thank them too, because they're working on bank holidays and weekends too. So I know when I tell you that I am reasonably satisfied with how the country is going. Yes, there have been some kinks. Yes, I would like some people not to do what they're doing. But compared to other countries, we are a lot better, and the majority of Barbadians, day by day and week by week, are getting the message. I want to say, therefore, that there must be one Barbados, as I said to you when last I left you formally a couple of weeks ago. One Barbados and one focus that we must remain completely attentive to. Stay focused. Stay focused. This virus will not get the better of us. And as I said, there'll be no surrender and there will be no retreat. At the same time, we, like others, recognize, and there are those who have posited, that the world is really just trying to breathe. The planet is trying to breathe. The skies are now clearer. The waters across the world, people are posting pictures and stories about how everybody is just trying to breathe. And at the same time, as we see the improvements in our environment, we're seeing improvements in our relations with our friends and our family and our work colleagues, because we're not sweating the small stuff. And we're remembering, focus on the things that matter. Everything that somebody tell you ain't gonna like. But that don't mean you and them gotta be bad friends. You don't gotta agree on everything. And the mere fact that I'm saying to us, one Barbados, bring everybody together. We're gonna fight this together, because I am not too proud to believe that we need help. Indeed, I've always told you that I do not know of any human being who is omnipotent nor omniscient, who is all-powerful or know everything. But I do know of one force that will sustain us. And it is ironic that that is the force of the weekend in which we find ourselves, which focuses on the renewal and the resurrection. And indeed, I'm minded to reflect on the fact that the pain of the crucifixion was also accompanied by the despair and the hopelessness of the disciples, who did not know where to turn or what to do after Jesus was on that cross being crucified. But they were equally anchored by the joy of the resurrection, the opportunity for renewal. And I want to end today by reading something that I'm sure some of you have seen on the internet moving around. But from the very first day that I saw it, it stuck with me. And when we talk about no surrender and no retreat, it's about recommitting to that purpose that we have to, because this too shall pass. This too shall come to an end. And while weeping may endure for a night, joy cometh always in the morning. And when joy comes, we want our hands to be together. Strong families, strong communities, strong nation, strong region, strong earth. And what is it that I want us to reflect on? I found these words in a poem called "And the People Stayed at Home" by Kitty O'Meara, an Irish-American teacher. And they are so absolutely apt that I want to share them with you on this weekend of reflection and renewal. She gave a poignant and fitting voice to what it means to live during the times of COVID-19 and what it could mean after. And I quote, "And the people stayed home and learned new ways of being. When the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live." I want this experience, my friends, as we stay at home, as we stay safe, as we learn new modes of behavior, to have to wash your hands regularly and don't do that thing which is so natural, touch your face. Find new ways of engaging with people, the house engagements through the internet, the living room concerts, all of those things. New ways of production, new ways of relating to people. As we do all of this, let us remember that we do it not as an end in itself, but as a platform to a better Barbados for stronger Barbadians, because there shall be no surrender and no retreat. And in the words of our national anthem, if we just proceed with God on the people's side, then we shall have no doubts nor fears. My friends, we are in this all together. Every day ain't gonna be easy. Some days you're gonna feel like pulling out your hair. But the one thing I know is that if we reach out to each other and we hold each other up, we will get through this. And I suspect 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we will be surprised at how well we have done, because we have used this as a moment of retooling, retraining, repurposing, refurbishing, renewal. Good night. Happy Easter. Blessed Easter. And to the children, before I go, I'm sorry this is going to be a year for you not to remember, because I know you want to be outside flying kites and you want to be eating Easter eggs. But listen to your mother, listen to your father, listen to your grandparents, and I promise you, when it is all over, I'm going to give you the biggest Easter party Barbados has ever seen. So just listen to them for now for me. Thank you and God bless.